Coming up on a newscast tonight. President Moon Jae-in meets his Philippine counterpart, President Rodrigo Duterte, who becomes the first Southeast Asian leader to visit Moon at the Blue House. President Moon and the visiting head of state are no strangers, as they've met before last year. While meetings were held between top officials of Pyongyang and Washington, the only bright spark so far is that their summit is confirmed. Different stands on various matters remain, and June 12th could be merely the first in a series of meetings. South Koreans will head to the polls to choose mayors and governors of numerous districts. All eyes will be on traditional conservative strongholds, as the ruling bloc is looking to ride on the strong approval ratings to expand their territory. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. Let's begin with the first visit to Seoul by a head of state from an ASEAN member country. Rodrigo Duterte spent this afternoon at the nation's top office with a summit with President Moon Jae-in. Our Cheonggwa correspondent Hwang Ho-jun shares with us what was discussed.
May our relations remain strong and continue to thrive for the benefit of both the Korean and Filipino people. After writing that message in the Cheonggwa guest book, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and his South Korean counterpart held a summit meeting together on Monday. President Duterte is the first head of state from an ASEAN member country to visit Seoul since President Moon took office. But this was actually the second time the current presidents of South Korea and the Philippines have met. The first was on the sidelines of the ASEAN Plus 3 summit and the East Asian summit last November. In Monday's meeting, the two leaders highly evaluated the 69 years of diplomatic relations between their countries.
한국과 필리핀은 한국 전쟁을 통해 다진 굳건한 우호관계를 토대로 지난 70년간 정치, 경제, 문화, 인적 교류 등 모든 분야에서 눈부신 성과를 이루어 오고 있습니다.
President Moon noted that South Korea is the Philippines' fifth largest trading partner and that human exchanges between the two countries have risen steadily. And to further promote such partnerships, the two leaders agreed to designate 2019 a Visit South Korea-Philippines year, which will mark the 70th anniversary of the two countries establishing diplomatic ties. According to a Blue House press release, the South Korean president also expressed his gratitude for the Philippines' support for the Moon administration's efforts to peacefully resolve the North Korea nuclear issue, as well as for the recent improvements in inter-Korean relations. The two leaders pledged their commitment to the denuclearization and establishment of peace on the Korean peninsula. Also discussed during their meeting was economic cooperation between Seoul and Manila. President Duterte said that President Moon's new Southern policy, which seeks to expand South Korea's diplomatic relations and economic cooperation with ASEAN nations, will help the Philippines achieve its own economic goal. Known as the Ambición Natin 2040, President Duterte's own long-term policy is aimed at transforming the Philippines into a mid to high-income nation by the year 2040 by creating a trustworthy, poverty-free middle-class society. Soon after their summit, Presidents Moon and Duterte signed an MOU pledging cooperation between their two countries in areas including transportation, trade, and renewable energy, which was then followed by a joint press conference. And to honor the visiting Philippine president, a dinner banquet and cultural performances were hosted by the South Korean president. President Duterte will leave for Manila on Tuesday. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Plus, the two nations agreed to boost economic cooperation. The nation's finance chief Kim Jong-un and his Filipino counterpart Carlos Dominguez agreed during Monday's meeting to expand bilateral trade, cooperate in the fields of science and technology, and work together to speed up negotiations for the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Trade Pact, which involves 16 countries. Seoul will also support infrastructure projects in the Philippines through its Economic Development Cooperation Fund, while Manila agreed to help support Korean companies' investment and operations in their country. Staying with the June 13 local elections now, the nation's top office announced today President Moon Jae-in will participate in early voting and cast his ballot on Friday.
President Moon's decision to take part in early voting is to boost voter turnout, which is usually as low as 50%, even though it's a nationwide election.
The Liberal leader will be the first sitting president to take part in early voting since the system was introduced in April 2013. According to the Cheongwade, many of Moon's aides, including Presidential Chief of Staff Im Jong-seok, National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong, and Chief Economic Advisor Jang Ha-sung, will also cast their ballots in advance. The spokesperson insisted, however, that the president's early voting has absolutely nothing to do with a potential visit to Singapore to join his American and North Korean counterparts. That summit is scheduled for the day before the election on June 12th. The first local elections under the Moon administration will be held next week. The race for mayor or governor jobs is mainly seen as a competition between the two biggest parties. Kim Min-ji highlights what's at stake for the rival blocs pushing themselves hard to win over voters.
The race is on for the leadership of 17 of South Korea's metropolitan cities or provinces. In the last local elections back in 2014, the New Politics Alliance for Democracy, the current ruling Democratic Party of Korea, had 9 mayors or governors elected, while the Saenuri Party, now the main opposition Liberty Korea Party, secured 8. This time around, the outcome of the local elections will be seen as a barometer of public sentiment about the Moon Jae-in administration, given that it's the first nationwide election since he took office in May last year. The ruling party is trying to add to the 9 they have already, while the main opposition is out to secure at least 6 posts. The most keenly watched areas for this year's local elections are traditional conservative strongholds like here in Gyeongsang-namdo province. Now these are the races to watch as the ruling party is riding the wave of the Moon Jae-in administration's high approval rating, and there are questions whether the main opposition party will be able to survive the onslaught. In fact, southern regions held by the Conservatives have been a focal point of the ruling party's campaign, with the party's leadership using most of their time so far supporting their candidates there. With the exception of 2 regions leaning towards the Conservative Party, some polls show Liberal candidates are in the lead. The ruling party has been calling for support from the people to get the policies of the Moon Jae-in government rolling in the Conservative-held areas.
If you pick candidates from the main opposition, it's a vote that allows and shows support for corruption. It won't be of any help to the public.
At the same time, the main opposition party is making the case that they know best how to deal with affairs of the region and asking voters to support them again. The leadership of the Conservative Party has been out on the streets nationwide, calling on people not to be blinded by polls, claiming they are inaccurate. The party says that the current government is only focusing on developments regarding North Korea, while the country's economy is in the doldrums.
Nothing is being done right here in our country while the president is doing nothing but work on Kim Jong-un. He is not thinking of reviving our economy, but focusing on boosting North Korea's economy.
But as it stands now, most experts say the environment is looking favorable for the ruling party.
The main opposition hasn't been able to build up enough trust in their party, given its relation to the impeachment of a former president. And although it's been pushing forward with issues of its own, such as reviving the economy and criticizing the government's shortcomings, it's not been able to garner public support, overshadowed by the success of the Moon administration in regards to developments with North Korea.
That said, it's going to be extra important as to how the party step up their campaigning with not so much time left. With early voting starting on Friday and less than 10 days until Election Day, the onus is on the parties to bring out their respective voter bases as the outcome will decide the future course of each party. For the winner, the upper hand, while for the loser, it's back to the drawing board. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Kim Yong-chul, the high-profile North Korean official that delivered a letter to U.S. President Donald Trump and met with his Secretary of State, is returning home. He is expected to brief the regime's leader on the trip to New York and Washington. Not much has been unveiled about the sessions, but according to our EG1, the talks were generally quite positive.
Kim Yong-chul, vice chairman of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party Central Committee, headed back to Pyongyang on Monday after his trip to the United States. Kim left New York City late Saturday afternoon local time and arrived in Beijing on Sunday en route to North Korea. He had arrived in New York City last Wednesday, holding 2 days of meetings with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, including official high-level talks on Thursday. On Friday, he visited the White House and delivered a personal letter to U.S. President Donald Trump from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, after which Trump announced that the June 12th summit in Singapore was back on. With the summit confirmation, the first major diplomatic hurdle seems to have been overcome, but significant differences remain between the two sides. Due to the range of complex issues at hand, President Trump has started hinting that the June 12th summit could actually be the first in a series of meetings between the two leaders.
We're not going to go in and sign something on June 12th. We never were. We're going to start a process. We can go fast, we can go slowly.
The extension of the Panmunjom talks, where U.S. delegates led by former nuclear negotiator Sung Kim held their fourth round of talks with North Korea on Sunday, shows much work is left to do, as indicated by Pompeo last week. Some experts say the difficulty lies in bridging the gap between what Kim and Trump can offer each other in the initial phase of negotiations.
The problem is we are in the very early stages. Trump wants big, bold promises on denuclearization from North Korea to persuade many of those skeptical of Pyongyang's true intentions. That could include a front-loaded agreement where the North gives up its nuclear weapons first. However, there's not much Trump can offer Kim at this time, as they would likely require congressional approval, or would take a long time.
The expert says bringing an official end to the decades-long Korean War and taking North Korea off the state sponsor of terrorism list could be a couple of things Trump could offer. But as for economic support, the lifting of U.S. sanctions would almost certainly have to wait. Watchers say that might be why President Trump seemed to deflect much of the financial responsibility to the North's three closest neighbors, South Korea, Japan, and China, when he spoke to reporters after his meeting with Kim Jong-un. 이지원, Arirang News.
Seoul's government is gearing up to officially implement what's been agreed upon in the recent high-level inter-Korean talks. The Unification Ministry plans to send its officials to check the sites for establishing a joint liaison office, while the Culture Ministry is working on the agenda for a meeting to discuss sports cooperation. For details, let's turn to our Oh Jung-hee.
South Korea will soon send officials to check the Kaesong industrial complex, where the two Koreas have agreed to establish a joint liaison office at Friday's high-level talks. The complex is the two Koreas' joint industrial park located at the inter-Korean border. But because it's been shut down since February 2016, some pre-work needs to be done to set up offices there. Seoul's Unification Ministry says the officials will go and check the site to prepare for necessary renovations and establish a temporary liaison office first.
A joint liaison office will station officials from both Seoul and Pyongyang. It's a symbol of inter-Korean interaction taking place on the northern side of the border. We expect it to be a groundbreaking measure that leads to stable improvement of inter-Korean relations.
Meanwhile, South Korea's Culture Ministry is prepping for the inter-Korean sports talks slated for June 18th. Main talking points are forming unified teams for 2018 Asian Games to be held in Indonesia this August, as well as holding an inter-Korean basketball game. Seoul also plans to invite Pyongyang's athletes to participate in the World Shooting Championship that's to take place in South Korea late August. The ministry says it expects the two Koreas to engage more on a working level after the sports talks to discuss cultural interaction, like publishing a joint Korean language dictionary. Other than these schedules, the two Koreas have a couple more events on their way. A general-level military talks will be held on June 14th to lower tensions on the Korean peninsula, and the Red Cross talks will be held on June 22nd for arranging reunions of war-torn families. The locations of the meetings have all been determined. A joint event that Seoul and Pyongyang hope to hold on June 15th to mark 18 years of their first summit agreement in 2000 is unlikely to happen, as June is already jam-packed with schedules for both Koreas. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
North Korea may have replaced all of its top 3 military officials with younger and more moderate ones. That's according to an intel source here in the nation. Cha Sang-mi examines the potential implications of the drastic move made at this particular point in time when we're inching closer to another historic summit.
A major military reshuffle could have taken place within North Korea, with all three of the regime's top military officials replaced. According to an intelligence source in South Korea, Pyongyang replaced its defense minister Park Yong-sik with Roh Kwang-chol, who's been serving as a vice minister. The chief of the Korean People's Army's General Staff Lee Myung-soo has been replaced with Lee Young-gil, who was the deputy chief. This follows the news that Kim Jong-un, the director of the General Political Bureau of the North Korean Army, had been replaced by Pyongyang Mayor Kim Soo-gil, confirmed last month through the North's state-run media. Some view that North Korea felt the need to bring about change in its military, along with the diplomatic turnaround surrounding the Korean peninsula. Especially with next week's talks with the U.S., some watchers say Pyongyang could have wanted to clear hardliners out of the way and tame the armed forces. But others point out that distinguishing hardliners and softliners within the North Korean military is meaningless, as Kim Jong-un already reorganized the army 4 years ago. They say age could be the reason for the reshuffle.
Park Yong-sik and Lee Myung-soo came down to Panmunjom for the Inter-Korean Summit in April, but they headed back to the north before finishing off the day's schedule. They are very old. They were born in the 1930s and 40s, so they can't be out for even a day-long schedule.
South Korea's Unification Ministry was cautious in its comments and said the news about two of the three officials hasn't been officially confirmed by the North. But the ministry said if true, this could have taken place at the North's Military Commission meeting last month.
Pyongyang reported that it held the first enlarged meeting of the ruling party's 7th Central Military Commission on May 18th and said it dealt with organizational matters like removing and appointing members of the commission and military organs.
The ministry added that if the news is true, it would be unprecedented and said that it will keep a close eye on related movement. 차상미, Arirang News.
South Korea's foreign minister held a phone meeting with their American counterpart today, just 3 days after their previous session. During the 15-minute phone, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo briefed Kang Kyung-hwa on the results of North Korean envoy Kim Yong-chol's trip to the United States. The duo also exchanged views on the upcoming Pyongyang-Washington summit and agreed to keep working closely together, even after the event, to achieve peace and denuclearization on the peninsula. Seoul's top diplomat held another phone meeting, this time with her Singaporean counterpart, Vivian Balakrishnan. They agreed to cooperate closely to ensure the success of the historic meeting in the city-state and to make the most of the ASEAN Regional Forum in August, where they will further discuss matters related to the Korean peninsula. North Korea's leader could be meeting with another head of state. Moscow-based RIA news agency, citing diplomatic sources, reports that Russian President Vladimir Putin invited Kim Jong-un to visit his country in September. During his trip to Pyongyang last week, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is said to have given the invitation to the regime's leader to visit during the annual Eastern Economic Forum scheduled to take place in September in Vladivostok. Come tomorrow, South Korea's top negotiator at the six-party talks will meet his Russian counterpart in Moscow. Lee Do-hoon, the special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, and Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Igor Murglov will share views on the current diplomatic situation as the hotly anticipated Pyongyang-Washington summit nears, possibly reflecting on the Inter-Korean summit and the Russian foreign minister's visit to Pyongyang. They will also discuss ways to cooperate in order to achieve denuclearization and lasting peace on the peninsula. South Korea's state-run Economic Institute highlighted the need for the government to consider slowing down when it comes to raising the minimum wage. The KDI warns if the current pace continues, it could do more harm than good to the labor market. Choi Si-young zooms in on the possible side effects.
The Korea Development Institute has warned that increases in the minimum wage due to take effect in 2019 and 2020 could result in job losses. The think tank projects that a 15% wage increase over the next 2 years could potentially lead to the loss of nearly 100,000 jobs in 2019 and 140,000 jobs the following year. Those increases would come on top of the Moon administration's 16% hike enacted this year, which brought the minimum wage up from about $6 an hour to $7. The institute highlighted similar difficulties in France, which stopped raising its minimum wage in 2005 once it had reached 60% of the median wage because it made it harder for low-wage earners to find employment. Korea's minimum wage in 2018 is already at 55% of the median. The report conceded that its estimates are based on the case of Hungary, where the wages were increased by 60% between 2000 and 2004. It also said it did not factor in government support for small businesses, which are usually hit hardest by higher minimum wages. The KDS report comes after the Blue House released figures that said the effects of the wage hike were 90% positive. However, the top office has come under fire for having made the calculation based on individual income rather than household income, and for excluding figures for the unemployed and self-employed. The Korea Development Institute stressed that the minimum wage increase has so far had few side effects, but it warns that the government should monitor the effects of the increases closely over the coming years. 최시영, Arirang News.
In the world of sports, the 2018 World Cup is right around the corner. After testing their chemistry in a couple of friendlies at home, the South Korean men's football team travels to Austria this time, part of their final preparations ahead of the big stage in Russia. Won Jong-hwan turns the spotlight to the new-look Taeguk Warriors and the challenge they face.
Head coach Shin Tae-yong and his 23 players left for their pre-World Cup camp in Liaison, Austria over the weekend after playing 2 friendly matches last week. South Korea beat Honduras 2-0 on Monday but lost to Bosnia and Herzegovina 3-1 in their final home World Cup warm-up match on Friday. After their game against Bosnia, Shin announced his final roster of 23 players ahead of FIFA's June 4th deadline. South Korea's head coach had to cut 3 players, including midfielder Lee Chung-yong, from the provisional squad that he tried out during the 2 friendly matches against Honduras and Bosnia. 29-year-old Lee had played at the 2 previous tournaments, but couldn't seize the chance to appear in the 3rd World Cup. Kim Jin-soo and Kwon Kyung-won were also cut from the provisional squad. With Lee Chung-yong not making the cut, Kaesong, the captain, will be the only player on the squad making his 3rd World Cup appearance. As captain, he expressed his determination to work hard for the players who weren't chosen for the squad and the players who missed out through injury.
We will try our best to give everything we've got for the players who were dropped from the squad.
The 23-man squad includes 11 overseas-based players and 12 domestic K-League players. Among the chosen players, Lee Seung-woo, a 20-year-old attacking midfielder, is the youngest Korean player going to Russia for the tournament. When the Taeguk Warriors arrive in Austria, they will have 2 more warm-up games against Bolivia on Thursday and Senegal on June 11th. And after the Senegal game, they will head to their training ground in the Russian city of St. Petersburg on June 12th, before their first game against Sweden on June 18th. South Korea are the underdogs in Group F. The other teams in South Korea's group are Germany, Sweden, and Mexico. Germany, the defending champions and the current world number 1, are among the favorites to win the trophy at this year's World Cup. South Korea, who are aiming for the round of 16, have made it through the group stage twice before, in 2002 and most recently in 2010. Won Jong-hwan, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, we are definitely seeing more rain as we entered into summer.
That's right, Daniel. Currently, due to the instability in the atmosphere, the southern Gangwon-do and Gyeongsangbuk provinces are getting unexpected showers this evening. And tomorrow, showers are expected to focus over in the far south, including Jeju. From tomorrow morning until the afternoon, Jeju will receive the most amount of rain of up to 40 millimeters and less as we move upwards. Meanwhile, the central region can only expect a light drizzle, if any at all. The daytime highs over in Seoul tomorrow will be very similar to today, but the southern regions where it's getting rain will be a lot cooler. Where it's not raining, it's going to be cloudy. Now, with Seoul starting off to 18 degrees Celsius, Daegu and Gyeongju beginning at 20 and 18 degrees. Into the afternoon, Seoul will top out to 27 degrees. Gwangju and Busan much relief from the heat, hitting 24 and 22 degrees. On Wednesday, which is Memorial Day in Korea, until the weekend, the whole country will get back the clear and sunny weather. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's it for tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.